On today's episode, I talk about dying to live, learning to live a full life from your lived experiences. I do touch on chapter 9, where we talk about cutting the cord and forgiving flowers. Throughout this book, you will not only read my story of my experiences that has created who I am today, but you will have an ability and a chance to write your story. There are pages and activities that are kind of outside the box that I will ask you to do. These behavior task assignments will help you see your grief and your trauma in a different light, hopefully offering you a bit of growth, a different perspective, and a way to heal. If you'd like to get Dying to Live, Learning to Live from your lived experiences, do visit robertspress.ca or robertspress.com or amazon.ca or amazon.com. Robertspress.com is our recent website, and it's been actually booming right now. So give it a try and get a copy of Dying to Live. Take care, guys. Welcome to Grief Uprooted, a podcast dedicated to sharing your grief stories. Together, we embark on the mystery of one's grief journey as they learn to live, heal, and be courageous in a world rooted in trauma. Join myself, Christine, in an open discussion to help you uproot the grief in all our lives. I am an award-winning author, professional speaker, and humanitarian in the field of grief and trauma. I want you to be part of the discussion. Welcome back to Grief Uprooted. I'm Christine, your host. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for showing up for your health and your grief. And thank you for bringing awareness to Grief Uprooted and grief that is in all our lives. I really want to take a moment and really tell you how much I appreciate you. robertspress.com is now up and running. It's doing great. Thank you for all your orders. And we haven't had any glitches yet with the site, so I'm happy about that. I want to let you know that we're going to have some Christmas products. We actually have some sale items on there. So if you're looking for something for somebody you love during the holidays, do check it out. There's mugs, there's journals, memory boxes, so much that we've included at robertspress.com. So today's topic, I kind of just want to have a conversation with you. And the holidays are coming up. And a lot of you keep asking about relationships, living relationships that are causing you grief. And a lot of times when we think about grief, all we're thinking about is death, the death of a loved one, the loss of something that we cherished and loved. But what if you had a family member or a friendship that on a daily basis was bringing you grief, was causing you to feel all that turmoil inside? So when we want to think about this, think about a family member. The holidays are fast approaching, and you will be having either Thanksgiving or you will be having Christmas with your family members. But a lot of us tend to put up with the toxic behaviors. I know a lot of the buzzwords are narcissistic, that we need to set boundaries and hold to them, that we should be true to ourselves. These are all things that we hear on a daily basis, just flashing in our faces on social media, on videos. But really, when it comes down to it, if we want to continue to grow and we want to grow within our grief, I know that might sound a little crazy to you, but there's grief all around us. So even the relationships we have in our lives, sometimes they come to an end. Sometimes that family member you really don't want to hang out with anymore. And it causes you this internal grief of denying the fact that you feel that way, of then feeling quite depressed when you're with the individual, to having guilt that you're not calling enough or spending enough time with this person, to downright feeling sad and wondering why this is happening. So today I really want to take a focus on these relationships in our lives that are causing us grief. And today I'm going to teach you some ways to end this grief and to free yourself from a person who does not truly like being with you. I know that's harsh, but really we have to look at our relationships. Most of you have experienced a death. That's why you're tuning in. But do you want to continue to waste the very valuable time you have with people who don't appreciate your gifts, who don't appreciate who you are? Do you want to waste your time with that? Do you want to continue to feel this ongoing grief? No, you don't. So, first, let's look at how these relationships start. So, a lot of things start in friendships with a commonality. So, if everybody's getting married, you hit that age between 20 and 30, nowadays, maybe up to 35 to 40, and all your friends are getting married. Maybe your cousin's getting married. That bond is created. Then you start to have babies. That bond is created. Maybe you join a sports team and you meet somebody and you have the same interests, and that bond is created. And at the time, the relationship serves you. It could be a relationship with a family member, it could be with a relationship with a very close friend. But at the time, that relationship serves you. It feels like emotionally you're able to be vulnerable, go back and forth with conversation, and you feel fulfilled and they feel fulfilled. But like everything in life, it changes. We, over time, evolve. Our children grow up, we age, our interests change. But what happens to a relationship is it changes too. So, over a period of time, your friendship could distance, people could move away, people's interests could change. They could get a divorce, they could get a new job. But then there's these people that just kind of hang on, and you feel obligated to have that relationship with them. But when do you say to yourself, this relationship is not healthy for me? What are some of the signs that what you had in common with this friend or family member, you no longer have? What are some of those signs? So let's explore that. Toxic behavior. I think we all pretty much know that one. That's when it's manipulative, abusive, and in any way, shape, or form, if it is, you know that we live in a world where we can pick up the phone and call somebody. But a lot of times we are put into a repetitive pattern. And you'll see this often with mothers, fathers, and children and siblings, more family members, in a repetitive pattern. And if it was repetitively put that, oh, don't worry, you're just too emotional, you think about it too much, or stop, you're just being an idiot, and it was repetitively said to you, you would take this as not abuse. You would not take that as something that was emotionally harming you or upsetting you. You would take it as that's what they always said. So you take it with a grain of salt, you let it go off your shoulder, and you don't care. But as we grow and we try to build our self esteem up, these little comments that people say erode you. And when you are grieving, in no way, shape, or form do you need to be reminded of your flaws. So, obviously, an abusive relationship, when it's physical abuse or emotional abuse or any form of abuse, you know to hit 911. But what happens when it's kind of hidden? It's like you're trying to figure out in your head, is it okay what they're saying to me? And what you need to do at that very moment is feel your gut and tell yourself, do you feel okay when people make these jokes about you or somebody says this type of stuff to you? Is this toxic to who you are? You need to stop and ask yourself that question. Next, lack of mutual respect. You know these people. You start talking and you start talking about what you wanted to say and what some of your issues are, and they talk right over you. It's as if they did not even hear you. They just kept going. And everything that you believed, or perhaps are trying to mull over in your mind or ruminate on, They just don't see eye to eye, which is okay. But they lacked respect for what you're seeing. They're capable of saying, that's just stupid. Why do you believe that? Why do you even think that? And that respect, again, starts to erode into who you are as a human being. This is causing you to feel emotions that, in a relationship, you want to feel safe. You want to be able to express yourself and feel that mutual respect back and forth. We all know when we're having that conversation with somebody or we're talking and we realize that that person respects who we are, they respect the choices you've made in life, it feels great. It really does. But when that person turns to you and says, I don't agree with you, and with that comes judgment, that level of respect drops. That's when these relationships become so hard. This is when you leave going out with your friends and you go home or going out with a family member and all you do is go blah 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 blah. Would you believe they said this and they said that? And you really have to look at how you're feeling in these relationships on a day-to-day basis. How are you feeling with this person when you're in their presence? The next was one-sided effect. This is really in terms of everything is about them. You know who I'm talking about. And you all have a friend like this where you go out for dinner or you want to make that phone call because you think you're feeling a little down. Maybe they'll help you out. And all they do is talk about themselves. They talk about all their own problems. They talk about all their own issues. And it becomes exhausting. And you leave feeling like you were a dumping ground. They just puked out all their problems on you. And you're sitting there going, I feel awful now. Like, and sometimes though, this works in a reverse way where you sometimes feel better that your life is not as shitty as that. But in light of that, you've just taken on somebody else's burdens in the sense that you just had this wash over you and it just went through you and you had to deal with that. It's exhausting, absolutely exhausting. And lastly, consistently negative, constant negativity, constantly. Nothing is ever happy. These people will just utterly suck every ounce of joy out of you. And, the strangest part of all of this is because I know everyone out there listening to me has friends or family members like this that they deal with, and they cause them grief. They cause them anxiety. They make them tense. Family events, you leave and you're upset and you're feeling this internal turmoil. And so many of you asked directly on Facebook, your advice sounds great, Christine, but how the heck do I solve this? Like, yeah, I get it. Get rid of the toxic people in my life, block them out. This all sounds wonderful, but how do I do that? I'll tell you how to do it. And it's something that's done internally. And what we're going to explore is how we internally first turn the tap off. How do we cut the cord and then approach ending a relationship? In chapter 9 of Dying to Live, my last book, I'm going to read you an excerpt from that in 1 second. But I talk all about this because we don't realize that grief, it comes in many different forms. It's one thing to be tuning into Grief Uprooted because someone you love died. I get that. A lot of you are here for that reason. But now you're also dealing with the grief of relationships that have changed, evolved over time, and you no longer need them in your life. And you're trying to figure out, how do I end that relationship? So let's start with an analogy of how that relationship was formed. We talked about having something in common, such as having children at the same time, such as getting married at the same time, or sports related, or just even being neighbors. I want you to envision a cord, very much like an umbilical cord, that comes from yourself to this friend or to this family member. And this cord is the commonality that brought you together. Could be high school. You went to high school together. It could be You dated at one time. It could be just a sports buddy. Could be so many different things. But this person is actively in your life and you feel obliged to talking to them, to making the phone call, to answering the text. And you can't figure out why you keep doing it. There's some bizarre attraction to this individual and you have no idea why. So let's envision a cord and it goes from your belly button to the other person. It can go from your wrist to them too. But there is this invisible cord that connects you to this person. And what that invisible cord does is makes you answer the text message. I know how many times people have said, I'm just going to ignore that person. And I'm not going to answer the text message. They're toxic. They're not good for me right now. I need to set boundaries. But every time you do, you go past them. You have this odd fascination with their life. And I'm here to tell you that it goes right back to that cord. It goes right back to what connected you. I know that sounds super deep, but whatever connected you to this individual, they're fulfilling something in you. You're looking for something. And until you realize that something may never come, that cord will always stay there. So what could possibly be the something you're looking for? It could be you're waiting for your friend to acknowledge you, to talk to you, to see your real problems. It could be that you're waiting for that mother or father to say, I'm proud of you. I love you. It could be a sibling that sees you as their best friend. It could be a friend who you just want them to hear you. It could be all sorts of things, and each one of them is individual to you. But you really want to take a look at what brought you together in that relationship. And once you're able to really sit down and hone in on, okay, and we're going to take an example. What brought me to this relationship was that we had our children at the same time and they went to the same school. So I actively had a relationship with another person. We brought our families together on holidays. We went to school events together. It bonded us. Our children loved it. We loved it. But as time went on, things evolve and change. That person can become such a grief-ridden individual in your life if they evolve in a different way. And you end up becoming the person that is the dumping ground for all their problems. You become the person who is listening to everything, the person who is caring and aiding this individual. And this is just your nature to care for others. And it fulfills something in you. It fulfills your nature of being a caregiver. So many people in my industry are caregivers naturally. No one chooses grief or this industry by mistake. It chooses you. And you are naturally drawn to helping and healing people. But while you're grieving, it's really hard because you can emotionally relate to people when they're in pain. But when we're taking on all these burdens and all these problems from these individuals, it is causing us grief. Even if you were not grieving the loss of a loved one, this is too much in our lives. So how do we know really when the friendship is causing grief? And how do we go about it? So when we think about the cord that attaches us, that's right from when we met them. What brought us to this friendship or this relationship? A family member, you understand, you're born into the family. This is why you're here. This is why you're siblings. This is why you're cousins. This is why this may be, a grandparent, could be anybody. We're looking for a relationship that you walk away from after you've had an interaction with them and you feel like utter shit. You might feel like you're not worth anything. You might feel you were unheard. But understanding why ending a friendship causes you grief on top of it. So if we choose to cut the cord here, what comes next? Will we feel this utter release and all of a sudden say, okay, I'm done with them. This is great? I've heard that too. I've worked with so many people in coaching, and we often start to explore, wait a minute, we got to slow this down. It isn't just like, I'm going to block somebody on Facebook. That's it. I'm doing it. I'm going to stand my ground. It doesn't work that way because emotionally within us, there's a process that takes place. And that process all comes back down to the cord that I just talked about. So let me explain a little bit about that. So cutting the cord, I'm going to read you a little bit from my book, just to give you an example. Looking back, a friend had once said, "You're too happy for me." Another person said, "You're just too much." These people never stopped being my friends, but I struggled with their words. I decided to cut the cords to the friends who felt I was just too much for them. Once I completed the behavioral task assignments of cutting the cord and forgiving flowers, I was able to let go of the negative people that were in negative comments within my life. They noticed that my presence changed drastically. They questioned the change in my emotional connection to them. I explained that I felt the connection was not healthy. As they had mentioned, they felt I was too happy or too much for them. In turn, I explained it was affecting my confidence in who I truly was. I explained that it was the best for me to move in a positive direction that made us both feel fulfilled. They resisted. So I continued saying that I just had to remove myself emotionally from the relationship. Pondering all that just took place within my own adult friendships. As I stood arm in arm with my young daughter, I said, when your light shines so bright that others are blinded, hand them a pair of sunglasses. I recall these friendships I had. I really do. And I remember realizing when they made these comments that they hurt. And I thought, why am I still here? Why am I still with these people? And that's when I envisioned the cord that was created between myself and these friends. And how was I going to let this go? Confronting a person and saying, I no longer want to be your friend, and this is why. You can try it. I have. I've ended up in a fight and an argument and ended up hurting somebody that I didn't mean to. Because I just wanted to have a conversation to find out, do you feel the same as me? But a lot of times they don't. They're not even at the same place you're at. When we experience grief in such an impactful way, such as the death of a loved one, trauma that has really impacted us, our perspective has changed drastically. And we need to realize that other people's perspective hasn't. So this is how you grow and change within grief. You've been shown a whole other world, and you've realized that in 1 second, it's gone. Your friends and your family may not even have that realization or that perception. And you no longer can carry the burden of these people. And it could just be one person in your life. It's usually only one or two. But that cord is there. Simply doing a visualization of closing your eyes and meditating repetitively on a cord between yourself and the individual that you feel is toxic in your life, and allowing that cord to slowly dissipate. This form of meditation was brought to me while I was in deployment. And at first, I fought it. As many of you know, I am more of a very active meditation style person. I like walking meditations. I like being in nature. I enjoy riding a motorcycle. I enjoy boxing. I enjoy getting my mind into something fully. Sitting and visualizing, I find difficult. I can definitely visualize well, but the sitting part, I kind of want to move. But repetitively, I took the time and starting off with like 1 minute, 2 minutes a day, and really looking at the friendships that I was dealing with, and what were they bringing to my life. I often would journal. I would write down this cord and this connection to this person started here and write a timeline. And then it gradually grew and grew and grew. And why is that connection still there? And is it a connection you need to have? If it's one you want to dissolve, you just really simply want to take the time to slowly integrate this into your life. You need to really cut the emotional connection in this relationship before you start cutting the physical connection. So, as I read that passage to you, these people noticed that I emotionally somehow did something. Both of them came back and said, "You've shifted. Something is different in you." And it really was that I no longer wanted to have that connection there. I felt like the relationship wasn't benefiting me. So when you do this visualization, you start with a minute. You simply close your eyes and you will envision a cord coming from yourself to the other person. And as you envision this, it will slowly, it will not be something that happens drastically. I know in doing this with clients, some people have been able to say, I just want to take out a pair of scissors and I want to cut it. And I'll say, then do it. But you have to realize this is an emotional release that you're asking your body, mind, and spirit to do. This isn't something that you can just say, hey, I'm going to block you on Facebook. We're done. It doesn't work because your emotions are still attached. When you're still checking out on Facebook, whether that person has blocked you back, if you're still wondering if they're going to text you, you're emotionally attached. When you're not emotionally attached, you're capable of letting that person go and really wishing them well and meaning it. So this visualization, you can start. I often suggest people starting with like a minute or two each day, depending on the relationship, depending if this person is every day calling you, you're just going to have to back it up slowly, and envision cutting the cord, cutting the connection to that individual. And what that means is we're cutting the constant contact. We're making sure that when we have contact with the individual, we journal or we stop for a second and go, what did we benefit from this conversation that I just had with them? Is this causing me grief? Is this burdening me even more? Or is this bringing me joy? Is this making me feel good about who I am? Cutting the cord or cutting the connection in chapter 9 of Dying to Live is very beneficial in cutting the cord to so many things in your life that don't need to be there. I feel like I'm speaking to the choir when I'm talking to people who are grieving that have lost a loved one. Not everybody's going to understand your pain and your grief. And we need to understand that. And we need to have supportive people around us. The last thing we need to have is negative, toxic, heavy relationships in our lives. And I'm here to tell you there's a way to break that. With this, I have an activity called Forgiving Flowers. And so many times people fight me on this activity. They literally look at me and go, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And then you can read on Facebook or on the blog, there are people that have written, I actually did this activity and holy crap, it really works. And it again is another way of cutting the cord. There's a purpose for this individual in your life. You have something connected to them. So we want to release that connection before we actually approach the individual to end the friendship. So I ask you to go to the store and buy flowers. I want you to buy a rose or a carnation or a tulip, whatever would represent that individual in your life, and that you may want to let go of them. Sometimes people need to buy a whole bouquet. It could be individuals that, they just want to be able to really disconnect emotionally. And we haven't even got to the part of ending the relationship, because you might be surprised what comes next. But with Forgiving Flowers, I would love you to go out. You can pick them in your backyard. You can get them wherever you like. But I want you to look at each flower and name it. Often I'll do this with people who want to let go of their past, who have toxic pasts that are affecting them in their present day. So each flower will represent the person that you want to cut the cord with, you want to release emotionally. So take your bouquet of flowers home, or your one flower, and put it on the table. When we water and we place the flowers in sunlight, they grow. And when we think of our friendships and our relationships in our lives, when we pay attention to them, when we water them, when we cultivate them, when we share our feelings in them and we work on them, they grow. But this is a relationship you want to let go of. So you don't want to water the flowers and you don't want to place them in the sun. You want to actively watch the flowers die and you want to talk to them. You want to be able to say, I'm letting this relationship go. I want to release myself from this. And when you combine that with your meditation of dissolving the cord between you and this person you have a relationship with that no longer serves you, you're emotionally releasing it. You can also combine a journal to this, and you're emotionally letting go of the reason that you had this person in your life, because they may no longer serve that purpose. Your children may no longer be young. You may no longer be part of a sports team. Could be 1,000 different reasons. You may no longer want to feel the burden of them calling you up and just dumping all their problems on you. So as this emotional release happens, and I'll tell you right now, it takes a good week for flowers to die. So actively doing your meditation and letting this go, journaling about that release, and then watching these flowers die, you will come to a place within yourself that you've emotionally let go of this relationship. You will cry. You will be sad. You may feel that you're doing something very wrong because you'll be like, this is my friend. I shouldn't want to do this. But you have to understand, your friend doesn't even know you're doing this. They'll still be calling you. They'll still be bugging you. But what you're releasing is that emotional connection, that guilt that you must be there for them 24/7 and listen to all their problems, that you must pick up the phone for them or they're going to be angry, that you have to just let the comments that possibly could be verbal abuse just roll off your shoulder. You don't have to have this in your life if it does not serve you. But what comes next might surprise you. Is that your friend may approach you and say, what are you doing? They can feel that emotional connection. And when you actively decide to dissolve an emotional connection with somebody, they start to become aware of that because your behaviors change. They naturally change. Your unconscious starts to realize this isn't something I want in my life. And then they may approach you about that. They may say, hey, what's up? At which point you can say, this relationship no longer serves me. And I need to move on. They may turn around and tell you 1,000 reasons why you should stay. And you may go, yeah, I never realized that. And they may never realize what they're bringing to it. And then you may have resolved that relationship. But it'll dissolve the old cord and create a new. We don't realize that relationships can cause us an enormous amount of grief in our lives. And there's a lot of us that don't have relationships because they don't want to deal with that grief. But they constantly need to be kind of turned over kind of looked at, make new friends. And that's so hard to do when we're grieving. So, in the period of cutting the cord and forgiving flowers, you are grieving. You are grieving the relationship that you had. You're slowly letting it go. As the flowers die, you're slowly journaling and letting that relationship go. But the kicker, you're not letting it go to say, okay, that's over. I'm done with that. You're letting it go to say, okay, what can this relationship be now? When do we say it's okay to end a relationship with somebody or a friendship with somebody and say, I can start new now? And you can start new with that individual if they want to meet you at that place. If they want to step up and say, okay, I understand that you're not happy in our friendship, then let me meet you. Tell me what you're not happy in. And you are no longer emotionally attached to the old relationship. You now would be able to grow and blossom into a new relationship. Some of the key things people ask me is they often say, well, why does ending a friendship cause them grief? They say, this is my friend that I see every once in a while, and I really didn't think was going to impact me. And all of a sudden, I've ended the relationship after doing cutting the cord and forgiving flowers. But I felt during that period, um, I felt like I was crying and it was grief that I was going through. And even though I never saw that individual often, and that's because, again, that cord that went from you to that other person was a connection. And that energy is there. And that can't just be deleted like that. That has to be something that you emotionally release. And as it releases, you're able to become more clear in your mind. You're able to say, okay, this relationship was of value to me. I loved the purpose of it and the time I had with that person, but now it's done. We've changed, we've moved on. So, yeah, ending a friendship can cause you to feel grief. Ending those relationships can, but it doesn't actually mean that you wouldn't have a continued relationship with that individual. The dynamics may change. And the level of grief that you're feeling, for some, can feel utterly horrible. We've all been there where at times somebody has said, I just don't, they've ignored you or they don't want to hang out with you anymore. And this is painful. And I often want to approach these things with emotionally releasing yourself before approaching that other person and saying, I'm done with this relationship. Obviously, there's times where people are just right out rude and you say, I'm done, get out of my life. But in these instances, we're looking at relationships that could be long term. We could be looking at relationships that are just too toxicity within our lives. And we want to end them, but we want to do it in a way that's not going to cause chaos or literally harm to another individual by saying, I'm just walking out on you. And so once we give ourselves permission, and this was another question that somebody said, is it okay? And I thought that was a really good question. Like, is it okay to say, I no longer want to be in a friendship with you? Yes. And I think it's interesting that people wonder because they think it's not a choice then. You know, this is my friend. I have to be with my friend my whole life. I have to be there for them because we're friends. We all have those friends that we never see for a period of time, but then there's a wedding, a funeral, and they show up. And that's because that cord that we have to that individual still exists. It could be a childhood friend, and that cord still is there, and you cherished that relationship. And when we look at it from this perspective, when we have relationships in our adult life that are still there or new that are toxic, it's okay to say this person does not serve where I'm going in my life. Often when someone dies or we experience grief, or I have it even in my career, my direction is changing. I'm growing. I'm learning new things. You start heading in a different direction. then a lot of times friends will question you. They will start to go, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" And you have to understand it's okay to put yourself first, especially if you're grieving. It is okay to say to a friend, "I can't do this right now." It's okay. Another question is the emotional toll of being the one who ends it. This is why we want to do it before we actually approach the individual to say we no longer want the relationship. You want to be clear in your mind that when the relationship started. So I love the cord analogy because we start off, you can do a timeline with the cord. So the cord is lined up between yourself and the other person. You can say at the beginning of the cord, it started with this. This is what we were connected on. And it gradually grew and grew and grew. And that relationship either continued to grow or it stopped somewhere along the lines. And that's okay. But if now that person is a level of toxicity to your life or a level of negativity and you can't handle this, it is quite okay to say this isn't for me. But before we approach that person and say that, we want to do all this work in the behind the scenes. We want to be able to emotionally allow ourselves to let go. Let go of the flowers. Don't water them. Don't give them sunlight. And gradually dissolve the connection you have with this individual emotionally. And like I said, some might just want to chop her right off, and that's totally okay. But you have to realize there's a period of grieving in there that comes from that. You're ending something, something that served a purpose for you. So, yes, it is okay to be the individual who makes that decision. And you want to do the work before you approach that person. Finding closure for you and for them. This part comes when you've done the emotional work yourself, you've decided the relationship is not for you, and you've cut the cord, you've done the forgiving flowers. Yes, you're still crying a bit. Yes, you're still missing the individual, but what you've done is emotionally released it for you. Crying is the best way. A good cry is great for everyone to just let things out and just let it go. Journaling is the same way, but we just have to let things go and we have to give ourselves time, our body and our emotions to process this, ruminate on it, and let it go. And then we want to approach the individual. And this is the hardest part. The hardest part is walking up to your friend, as I did, and said, "I don't believe this relationship is serving me anymore." And by that time, you're much more comfortable in your skin. You have a plan in your mind of why you want to end the relationship. You have an idea of where you think this will go, but you never know what the other person may say or do. But often you can walk up and say, "I put a lot of thought in this, and I've enjoyed the relationship and the friendship that we have had. But presently, I need to move on." And friendships are like seasons. Sometimes there's a really good season where you are hanging out with people, enjoying them, getting to know them, and the next season comes and they're not there. And that's okay. And it's okay to have that heart to heart conversation with somebody to say, "I just can't do it anymore." And it's not all about them. And it's not all about you. It's mutual. And you want to move along in a positive way that works for you. And you want to support them in what they want to do. And maybe you're not the person that can help them. Maybe they're dumping all their problems on you, and they could be dumping them on somebody that could actually help them with it, such as a counselor, such as a therapist, or such as a coach. Or they could join a group, or maybe they'd find a friend that's in a similar situation. And this is you freeing up yourself emotionally to allow new relationships to come in. Allow yourself to go find some relationships. It doesn't have to be that we keep all these people in our lives because the guilt is utterly killing us. And the guilt is just overflowing that we have to have these people in our lives because they've been in our lives our whole life. So I can't say goodbye to them. You're not. You're asking for the dynamics to change. You're asking that your mind, body, and spirit release the connection that you have to them because it's toxic, it's not healthy, and it's not serving you. What happens after that and moving forward after you've ended a friendship is you'll feel a bit lonely because if this person served or took up a lot of time in your life, it's similar to grief that they are no longer there. But what you will notice is you'll start to fill it with things that fill you up. You'll start to fill it with things that serve you. You'll no longer need to ask people to put sunglasses on because you shine too bright, because you talk too much, because you have some crazy ideas, or because you're silent, because you don't talk so much, because it could be 1,000 reasons. Because you'll open the door for new friends to walk in. People who might be in the same position you're in now, and they'll connect a cord there. So many of us are grieving. And what happens when we join these support groups or we join, and I know even on some of the Zoom calls I do, my students connect. They connect with each other. And it'll be like, hey, yeah, I just lost my husband. Or I just lost a child also. And you can instantly see these cords going click, 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 click. And these people will go on a journey together. It'll be much different than the other journeys they went on. Much more vulnerable, much more painful. But they have someone to walk with. They have someone now that fills that void a little bit for them. Relationships are so hard. Grieving is so hard. But this is all the growth that we experience in our lives. And we do not want to waste not even a minute on a relationship that's not fulfilling you. And it is okay. Hear me when I say that. It is okay to end a relationship with somebody that is not serving your needs too. You deserve to feel loved. You deserve to feel heard, respected, and appreciated. You deserve that. You don't deserve to feel guilty to answering a call or constantly being the person who's solving all the problems. It's okay to switch and change our relationships, but we have to be careful. We want to make sure that we allow ourselves to emotionally release them before we go and have that conversation. We want to be able to sit down and have a conversation with these people if they're willing and want to, as to how to fix a relationship. You'd be surprised on how many times friendships will work out because they've been feeling the same thing. Or it could be that it's just come to the end and you can cherish that. And you may choose to say, let's get together once a year and that's all. It's okay to be the one who says this relationship or friendship no longer serves me. It's okay to grieve it and let it go. I know that grief is by far the hardest thing we face in our lives. Grief Uprooted, professional grief and empowerment coaching are not to be used as a substitute for professional advice by legal, medical, financial, business, spiritual, or other qualified professionals. All our products and services are designed for grief empowerment through learning and sharing of one's lived experiences. That we will heal, because it is only together that we grieve. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And I really, really, really appreciate you. Take care.